Our next guest is the two-time Hugo Award-winning and now three-time finalist managing editor of Uncanny, a magazine of science fiction and fantasy, and the first Filipina Hugo winner. She is an essayist, public speaker, fire performance artist with Rax Geek Fire and Belly Dance Troupe, which she will be working with this Thursday. She'll be spinning fire with them Thursday at the Uptown Underground. Check that out, ask her more about it after the show. And she also serves as president on the board for Chicago Nerd Social Club. In her opinion, Spam musubi is the perfect snack food, and spices make everything better. Please welcome Michi Trota.
Good to lower down the mic even though I'm wearing 4-inch platforms. So I was having a time trying to figure out what I was going to read today, and then I realized today's May 1st. It is the first day of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. So that made my choice a little bit easier. I wrote this essay about 4 years ago, and it's very special to me because this was sort of my doorway into a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now, like with Uncanny, and a lot of the progression that I'm trying to do in my own writing. This sort of talks about a lot of the issues about why I'm such a loud person about representation and about why it matters what we see, who we see creating on the screen, in the media that we enjoy, because it actually has an effect, and I have not really had that brought home to me so hard as when I started trying to write my own fiction. So this essay was originally part of a collection for an anthology called Invisible, Essays on Representation in Science Fiction and Fantasy. It was part of the first volume, and they are now in their third iteration, which I believe the third one is actually up for a Hugo. I'm gonna have to double check that because it was a really great list of nominees this year. So the essay is called I Don't See Color. Almost all of the women in science fiction and fantasy fandoms that I have felt the strongest affinity for have been white. Partially it's because there just aren't many Asian, particularly Filipina, women in supportive or even leading roles in the fandoms that I grew up with. Most of the TV shows I loved watching as a child suffered from a terminal case of Smurfette syndrome, in which the single girl on the team was white. And when there were characters who were Asian women, they almost universally conformed to some variation of an Asian stereotype. The awkward, often science or tech nerd, the pop star, the dragon lady, the grades-obsessed student, and they were almost always without a love interest, or at least a love interest who would reciprocate their feelings. No one likes to see themselves as a walking cardboard cutout, but that's not really the problem with seeing characters who look like you being played as stereotypes. It's not that I don't find anything of myself to relate to in those stereotypes, because yes, I played the piano, yes, I was a hyper-competitive honor student, and I even studied kendo and martial arts for several years. The fact is, it's that many of those stereotypes felt painfully familiar. Seeing those moments reduced to caricatured facets and bad punchlines that all but screamed, "Look at how different and exotic these people are," made me want to run in the opposite direction. Because when you are the only Asian kid in your neighborhood and you get weird looks for bringing spicy chicharron with vinegar and garlic pork-filled siopao to the annual block party, you really do not need any more reminders that you are not like everyone else. So when I discovered comics, I ignored the teenage, spunky, fireworks-spouting Jubilee because I wanted to be like the poised and telepathic, telekinetic, and occasionally cosmically powerful, slightly off-kilter Jean Grey, or the sarcastic ass-kicking Domino. I played Sonya in Mortal Kombat instead of Chun-Li in Street Fighter. Really, Chun-Li was an awesome character if you ever tried playing her. Robotech was probably the defining fandom of my childhood, and it really had lots of women in positions of authority who were tough, intelligent, and independent, and just as likely to do the rescuing as be rescued. But I hated the single Asian girl, the pop star Lin Min Mei. Even though she was one of the most influential characters throughout the series, I found her to be shallow, self-absorbed, and selfish. Nothing that I wanted to emulate. It was her romantic rival, the no-nonsense Lisa Hayes, who I empathized with. She was brave, responsible, resourceful, and in the end, she got the guy. At the time, I did not see anything odd about this. I grew up being told that not seeing color was the best way to avoid racism. Regardless of the color of their skin, people were not different inside, and treating everyone as if they were the same meant that you were not racist. So if everyone was the same, there was no reason why I shouldn't want to be more like Lisa than Min Mei, or why I shouldn't see myself more in Jean Grey than Jubilee. After all, the X-Men Psylocke was still the same person after her mind was switched from her white British woman's body into that of an Asian assassin. Seriously, because comics. The writers wanted Psylocke not to look like everyone else. Chris Claremont has actually gone on record saying this. So why not make over the white girl into an Asian assassin? Skin color was nothing more than interchangeable window dressing if we are all the same underneath. But if people really don't see color, why was I the only one getting asked about martial arts on the playground and told that I spoke English really well? Why did I always have to play Sulu during make-believe at recess when we were playing Star Trek? If people still treated me differently, maybe it was because I wasn't acting enough like everyone else, or trying hard enough not to see skin color, especially my own. There's a passage from an essay about growing up Asian in America that encapsulates how I feel about this struggle and how I've tried to articulate this about my relationship with racial identity. When our parents saw that their children could perform as white, they encouraged it without teaching us or telling us to love our Asian side. And as the line between performing as white and being white blurred, so did the line between thinking that white people are better and thinking that being white is better. In hindsight, our biggest mistake was ever having believed in that line at all. Nowhere has the absence of that line been more apparent than in my own writing. Every piece of fiction I have ever written has been based around white characters. That short story I wrote about a family dealing with parental loss like mine when I was 14, all white people. The aborted fantasy tetralogy I spent years outlining and rewriting those first 5 chapters, which I have still not gotten beyond. The main characters were all white, and the setting was another Tolkien-esque pseudo-Western Europe. When I Mary Sued myself into my fan fiction, I wrote myself as a white girl. Apparently, it never once occurred to me to write any Asian characters, much less protagonists, even when they were supposed to be me. In my personal essays, there is next to nothing about my experiences as an Asian American or as Filipina, outside the mentions of the Filipino food that my parents made. I can easily write thousands of words about what it means to be a woman who loves geeky things and what it was like to be the only woman in my local comic book store every Wednesday. I can write about the shock of recognizing internalized sexism within myself and the embarrassment of realizing that cotton candy pink blush is really not my color. I don't have to force myself to acknowledge my relationship with gender. Writing about my relationship with race, on the other hand, is a struggle. When I write about being Asian, I instinctively move to the emotionally neutral realm of academia and sociological concepts. Writing about my relationship with race is like trying to talk to a distant relative who engenders no discernible feelings. Rebuilding that connection requires peeling away 36 years of scar tissue that I never knew I had. And while each layer reveals new depths of understanding, it also forces me to deal with the consequences of that self-alienation. What does it mean when I say I don't see race? It means that because I learned to see no difference between white and color, I have whitewashed my own sense of self. It means that I know more about what it is to be a white person in America than what it means to be Asian or Filipina, and I'm a stranger everywhere. It means that I built my identity on a warped foundation, but never noticed that asymmetry until I not only tried creating new worlds upon that foundation, but began exploring my own inner world as well. In the absence of acknowledging how being Asian is an inescapable part of who I am, I have become a cipher to myself. Navigating the pitfalls and traps of gender stereotypes as a woman, it's been daunting, but I have never lost sight of my internal compass there. Exploring what it means to be an Asian woman, to be Filipina American, not just in terms of distant abstract social constructs, but in the language of my deepest self, means chasing my own personal white rabbit down the hole, and I have no idea what I will find on the other side. Thank you.